Hello and welcome to my live painting demo. This is Saturday afternoon. I was hoping to do this so that some of my followers who are in different time zones who normally can't tune in when I do the evening demos can have a chance. I didn't announce this one just because I wasn't 100% sure I was going to do it. And I need to get the camera adjusted just a little bit so it's not so much at an angle. And I think that's just about where I want it, so I can get ready and jump right in. So I'm just going to get a quick lay in with the paint, um, sketching with the paint, and get this some measurements. And I can come in, just sort of get the layout of his face a little bit. Let's see, get a longer brush to measure. At the bottom of his chin, that looks pretty good. And so I need that to come over. Usually, when I just draw quickly like this, it's amazing how far off I am in terms of if I want to keep it in relationship to the actual outline of the panel or the edges of the panel. Let me, before I start, let me see where the bottom of that ear is. Um, hey, Ellen, hello. I'm glad you can make it. At least this time it's not the middle of the night for you. What time are you in Sweden, right? Um, I'm wondering what time that is there. Okay, measure the top of the ear. Starts from there. Okay. Okay. So 7 p.m. in Sweden. Well, that's a little bit easier. All right, now we have 5 people tuned in. I announced this over on Instagram. I don't know if any of you who saw my live announcement and quick palette demo um, have come over or not. And it's something like this here with the nose. Just kind of blocking in the general shapes of things that then I can come, once I've kind of got that nailed down, that helps me be a little more aggressive with the paint because then I know with more assurance where I'm going to put things down are generally in the right spot. I, for those who don't know, I paint in an alla prima method, which essentially means wet into wet or all at one go essentially, which means that the oil paint is all wet as you're painting, and the idea is that you get lots of mixing effects. You're painting mixes on the palette itself. I'm going to slide this up to see where those landmarks are. Um, Feel free to ask me any questions about my materials, my palette, my painting method. Um, Anything that comes to mind is fine. You can also ask me social media questions if anyone has questions about things like um, about YouTube or Instagram. If you're looking to grow your channels, if you're doing artwork and posting them to social media, I now feel like I have a fair amount of experience at some of this and can speak with some authority. Okay, before that's fine. Didn't expect a big audience today, obviously, because I didn't really do any publicity of this, which sometimes I find you do a lot of work to promote uh, an event, or in this case, a painting demo. And after all that work, you end up having just the same number of people as if you hadn't. So sometimes it's a little bit easier not to do all the promotion and hope that some people show up, and that's fine. And that's what it is today, the very low key. Um, so finding some of my darker reds to just put down in the lips. I'm just really trying to get a sense of the initial um, the initial layout. So I'm off somewhere because I can measure his corner of his lip is here, and I have it that far over. So I think where I started to put in the nose is not, and the jawline is not the right place. So I'm going to go back and redraw that. This has to be much further over to begin with. And then just going to paint right through what I already put down. And then that jawline is just going to be a lot sharper. So I'm going to have to go ahead and redraw the nose. I could have gone two ways with that. I could have just accepted where I put them down and then work around that. But I did pick very carefully the placement of his head in the panel, and so I want to preserve that. So let's go ahead and see if I'm getting the nose in the right place. Yep. And oh, well, that's not going to be good. Okay, let's do the measurement of the base. I psyched myself out a little bit there because I had the image slid up. So the base of the nose actually also is much lower than what I had it. So that's down here. Okay, so the first, you can just, you know, start over with the last 5 minutes, pretend like you're just coming in, because I have to do all this part over again. Okay, that's, and in fact, I'm just gonna mix a little bit of his, the midtones in his face so that I can wipe out some of those lines that I don't want, and just switching to a little bit bigger brush. But I'm just mixing, I don't know if I want to call it flesh tones, but just the color and values on the dark side of his face. It almost has a little purple or orange together in there. That may look too dark to some, but that is going to be the right value. Once I get some of the lighter values next to it, then it will start to look right. And so hopefully now I can put his mouth in the right place. So I have this got this picture off of Sketchy, so you should be able to find it. His name is Michael Svizzero, Svizzero. Let me see if I'll just type it out here. There. He also has an Instagram page, and I'm not sure he's posted the same picture on there, but you should be able to find it on Sketchy. You're on Sketchy too, right, Ellen? Yeah. Okay, so now again with the lips. I think even higher. I'm not sure that I have that the right place. It's not too far off. That that dark separation between his lips is right about there, which means I have to get the nose down even a little bit lower. Once I get to a certain place, then I can just do more direct comparison with the photo. I don't have to do quite so much measuring. Um, it's taking me a little bit longer to get there today. That's going to be too dark for the tip of his nose. I've got a lot of purple in there, so unfortunately I'm going to have to work pretty hard to overcome that with a very light pink tone over that to get to the color that I want on the tip of his nose. So the disadvantage of wet into wet is one of them is that if you don't like the color that you put down, either you have to wipe it off or add a lot more of a color over it to sort of overcome that color that you didn't want. Okay, and make sure I get the right shape to his lips too. So at least there's not a lot of very high key color in his face. The last painting I did of Lisa, her face was lit from the side with a very high key tone, high chroma key light, and so it meant that I had to work very hard to reproduce that color in the paint, and that was a bit of a workout. And so this, I can go with some fairly neutral tones in here and still be kind of okay. Don't have to be so careful with the colors on my palette. Okay, want to get his bottom lip indicated in here. That's going to be probably my one of my highest key reds in the painting. And I can safely use some very dark purple here in the case where it looks almost black in the photo, but I can keep that pretty purple or fairly purple. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, and then the chin. Just putting down a bunch of white that had some other colors in it already. That's looking fairly close. And want to measure the bottom of his chin again, make sure I'm still in the right place. Yep, that's not too far off, close enough to do some adjusting. Okay, indicate some of that shadow. For some reason, I never get the jawline right the first time. It's one of those things my brain wants to make it less acute, and so I have to keep on adjusting it until it get it to where it really needs to be. Okay, trying to get that sort of mauve brown, red, orange color that's here. So it's sort of a neutral-ish orange, and I guess guess that's maybe why I'm having trouble describing it, because the the actual hue of the color isn't that apparent. Okay, let's just see where I am. So he has this makeup around his eyes, like charcoal, and that's going to give him that sort of Lost Boy effect. And I have that much too high. His cheekbones may be high, but not that high. Okay, that's better. Um, but unfortunately, I just put down a lot of black where his eye is going to be. So I'm just going to, get with a wet brush, just pick up some of that paint so I don't have such a hard time getting the whites of the eye. Okay. And going to keep on going. Where is that other brush I was using? Here. Okay, so I try to lean towards having a brush that's bigger than, or on the big side for what I want to do, and that will keep my it will allow me to work faster, and it will keep the brush strokes larger, fresher, cleaner than having to do lots of little little strokes to get the same thing. Okay, let's go and indicate some of his forehead here. Kind of a dirty, dirty violet colors in there. That doesn't look like it's going to be dark enough for the most part, so let's see if I can get it to where it needs to be. Okay, and I gotta improve the shape of the eyebrow here. And then I'm gonna remeasure that eyebrow just to make sure it's where it needs to be. Need to bring it down a little lower. And I think that the hollow of his eye on the bridge of the nose is actually over just a little bit. And I'm going to indicate where his iris is, just to get an idea of what I'm working towards. Yep. The corner of his eye there. Okay. So, gonna keep on going here. See if I can get that far part of the white of his eye to read, just to get a sense of where it is. Corner of the eye comes actually a little bit lower here. That's not quite as clean as it needs to be to read yet, but I've got a sense of where it is. Maybe if I just throw down a little highlight on the pupil, that'll help a little bit. So that's just kind of a placeholder right now. And I want to get fill in this area black. Need a bigger brush. Okay, where's that? Yeah, I think this is a good size for that. Just get it nice, fairly wet, um, loose, and transparent. And that will help me read the values much better. I'm just going to bring all that shadow shape, his cast shadow from his jaw, the shirt, and the shadow behind him. Just going to paint that all as one dark form, just to keep it nice and simple. And I'm not going to worry too much if it's a little rough around the edges. That might create a little more interest. I can decide that towards the end of the painting, how much of the brushiness of the background I want to keep. In the photo, there's a lot more, there's sort of like blue violets. It gets a little lighter around here. I am going to mimic that if I can, mixing just a touch of white with the blues and purples so that it will just seem a little bit cloudier. The bottom of the ear, it's right about there. And the tip of the ear, it's pretty close to the edge there. Don't know if that's just right. I'll have to go back and measure a little bit. And again, I can make his hair in the background of the painting all one big shape. Bring his hair across there and then close in that. Okay. So that'll help speed things up a little bit, just getting some of those bigger forms in. And I'm going to do something similar with the colors in his neck. Just mix some orange and purple together to get sort of a darker orange. If I mixed black with the orange, it would tend to go greener. Mixing that purple kind of keeps it closer to the same hue. And there's a little more white as we see the highlights on his neck and shoulder. Okay, good. Alan is painting. People feel free to paint along too. I've said this before. Anyone who paints along with me, I'll post their finished work to my Instagram page. So you get a little exposure that way. Okay, so one of the nice things about painting alla prima is you get these really nice, gorgeous, soft and hard edges as you push the paint around. And something that you can't really achieve, or it's very difficult to achieve with acrylic paint or watercolors. Okay. And so I just want to try to get the edges to feel accurate in some of where these forms are going into shadow. And if I do that quickly, then we'll start to feel those forms and how they're moving in space. Yeah, it just has a little bit of red towards the end of his nose. Now I have this really big brush, and it makes it hard to put down um, smaller shapes accurately, but I'm going to continue to use the bigger brush just because um, it gives me the effect that I want, and I can always go in and correct some of those smaller shapes. So you see here I have that his cheek feels really flat, and then it has kind of a sharp line, and this is where I want to have darker tones on one side of the cheek and the other, so that I can feel it bending and then it dropping off quicker into the background. It's turning also a little bit purple as it goes away. And so I can just add, unfortunately there's just a little bit of white in there that's making it hard to get that. I'm going to see if I can switch to a smaller brush and get it a little bit cleaner to get that. So I've just cut into the cheek a little sharper, which is a little inside of where the actual contour is. And then I can come back with another color, purple and orange again, I think. Looking awfully black though. And then try to push that contour out again, but more subtly. Soften that up. And then I want a little bit of the dark on the other side of the cheek, which has a bit of red in it, just to get um, that sense of turn in the middle of the cheek. There's a little bit of light that's bouncing off of the cheek just behind the tip of the nose. That's creating a little interest, so I want to see if I can keep that. And then not really that noticeable initially, but there's some blue tones, blue notes coming in at the, maybe there's some makeup there or something, or it's reflecting some light. It's hard to tell. And see if I can get the nose to come out a little bit further with some pinkish reds, which means I have to do a darker shadow where that falls off right here. And underneath the tip of the nose here, that's hitting the cheek. So try to get that a little more accurately. And then the nostrils just coming up a little bit too high. So just make those little adjustments. Some of those, it doesn't have to be adjusted. It's only if you really want to hold on to a certain level of likeness that that you want to make some of those changes. Do have a little bit of form facing down on the underside of the tip of the nose before the shadow or the darker area of the nostril. So I'm just going to go in and correct that. That looks pretty good. Hopefully it's in the right place and I won't have to move it. And then I need a very dark red. So I'm hitting my alizarin permanent to get that right here. So I'm just doing it in a very broad stroke. I can come back later and soften up edges where I need to. Okay. And then I'm just going to indicate he has a highlight that's running down the middle of his nose and on the tip there. I'm just going to just put it in very roughly. I can go back again and be a little more exact about it later. this is where I'm going to push a little the color a little bit more even than it's in the photo, the reds in his cheeks right here. I think I can get away with it, and it'll make him look a little more rougey. And then here's a necessary um, light part of the form where it's closest to the pointing towards the light, and that will help give his cheek a little more dimension. And then play around with that, the shape of the makeup here, and carve into the eye a bit. There's a little bit of blue reflected light right under his eyebrow. And then I have to bring that top of that eyebrow down. It's still looking too high. Not by much, but enough. Okay. And need that to go darker. The edge of his forehead's too light. That's going to be really important to get this area dark enough, because if I don't, it won't feel like his forehead is turning. It's much lighter in this area and then slowly turns darker. If you think of it almost like a cylinder that's moving into shadow, I have to think about getting that to get progressively darker as it gets towards that edge. Okay. Small audience today, but that's okay. Again, for those that don't have the time to watch the whole thing, and it's looking like I'm only going to do this for about an hour and a half to finish it. Or, yeah, I don't think I can get this done in 20 minutes. So basically about a little bit after 1:30, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, in about an hour or so, this should be finished. It also will be posted to YouTube afterwards in its entirety, if you're interested in watching it at a later time. Okay, I can see I've just painted that dark shape around his eye is too high. So let me knock it down a little bit. Okay, so whites of eyes, a real common mistake is to paint them too light. I just painted it too dark, but that's okay. Because I think our brain wants to see it as white, even though in the true value in relationship to other things in the image is not white. It's closer to a cool gray. And so it's just, with the knowledge of that, it's just easier to paint it gray to begin with, and then if it's too dark, lighten it up. But it's a little bit harder to go the other way, because our brain wants to make it lighter and lighter. But something interesting happens if you do get it painted in the right values. It just starts to have a quality to it that it just feels like a real eye, and not just like a cartoon of an eye, and starts to feel very convincing, and that's a neat thing. Now I wish I had found my my phthalo emerald went missing. I don't know where I put it, and I've dumped out all my paints on the floor to see if I can find it. Oh, maybe this is it. Well, no wonder I couldn't find it. Look at this thing. Okay, but I do need that color for the color in his eye. It's just, I could probably get there with the phthalo blue, but I just know from experience that I want to lean that just a little bit greener. Okay, there it is. I think it's time to buy a new tube of of this. Oh, I may have one already, but at least have the put the new tube in my bag so that if I can't find it, I can open up the new tube. Okay, so that's as I add blue to that phthalo emerald, it does start to get a little bit cooler, meaning it goes more towards a straight blue, though you can still see a lot of yellow in it. Um, and so that's why I want to start off with the phthalo emerald as opposed to just going straight with phthalo blue. I have that eye too high, so a little measuring won't hurt. Okay, measuring right to the center of his pupil. Yep, so I'm about almost a centimeter too high. So I'm just going to force myself all around to go lower. Just come in with the top of the eye, just knock it down. Okay. Which means I probably have that eyebrow above too high also. So I just have to start carving into that to get that a little more where it should be. Okay. So I know he's going to have this nice highlight here. I'm just not going white yet there, but just preserving the lightness and working around it. Okay, bigger brush, bigger brush. And the side of his face is actually going pretty red. And transitions lighter as it moves towards the middle of his face. And I can move the shadow a lot wider because it does come out a lot more here. Okay. At some point I'll have enough of the painting done that I can do some of the finer adjustments that will give it a greater sense of realism. Not quite there yet. Still feeling a little funky. I'm gonna adjust that other eye so that it's sitting in the right place, sort of. And his ear, which is fairly pink at the top, red, and then goes into less intense reddish color. Okay. Now I can start doing some adjusting. I need more white. So the way I paint, I use just about as much white as all the other colors combined. Depends on the painting, but I add white, a lot of white to my colors. Most of my colors are have very high tinting strength, so it takes a lot of white to lighten and to dull them down. Or in cases where I don't want to dull them down, but I just want to add a lot of pure white with just a touch of the color. And so I go through a lot of white. And I think that's actually typical for most painters, how they mix their colors will tend to use a lot of white unless you're starting off with a lot of neutral colors and don't need as much white. Um, I know some painters that use a lot of more yellow in lightening colors than I do. They use use yellow to lighten as a way of preserving some of the intensity and the warmth of their warmer colors. So they'll lighten a red or lighten a magenta using yellow instead of using white, which white would cool it off much faster. And maybe that's something I need to think about more as I'm painting, is look to use yellow more often than I do. Just gonna not get that darker value down. And also, there's don't quite have all that shadow of his upper lip on his lower lip yet. And just continue adjusting to closer to what I'm seeing in the photo. Because this, in a way, this image is fairly simple. So if I keep on um, making sure those simplified shapes are the right shape in the right place, then at some point this will become much more convincing, um, sort of realistic rendition. Even though I am keeping it really loose, it still should feel fairly accurate. And that's actually one of my goals, is to do loose but precise rendering of the forms. So, but that takes a lot of practice and a lot of looking, and just making sure that when you put down a stroke, that you're just getting it just in the right place. Okay, how's that? I feel like I'm missing some subtleties here in this. I don't know if you can hear the scuttling in the background. That's my cat chasing a mouse that decided to come into the air conditioned interior of our house. But but maybe we'll think twice about it. Oh, you got something. Oh, great, Pasha. Good job. Fantastic. For a while, Pasha just would ignore the mice, and one of the purposes of getting the cat, we thought, was like, hey, it would help us with our mouse problem. But then he wasn't doing his job, and but now he seems to have decided that he does want to be a mouser. So we're kind of, in a way, happy about that. Um, but it's still alive. Oh, come on, Pasha. Come on. Okay. I'm just going to try to ignore that for now, since there's nothing I can do about it. Okay. Again, I'm just working on improving the accuracy of some of these forms here. And this will hopefully start to gel at some point soon, where you really start to feel um, like it feels like real flesh that you can touch. Not quite there yet, but getting there. Just just takes lots of um, value control and accuracy. Okay. So I'm kind of curious where people are tuning in from. Um, if you don't mind, just send put in a comment of where you're watching from. If you're in the US, that's great, but I was really hoping that more people who are in other time zones are able to tune in. Okay. Okay. So we're about 45 minutes into this so far. Oh, Pasha, you're not making this easy on me, huh? Unfortunately, Pasha caught the mouse but didn't kill the mouse, so it's just he's sort of walking around with it, and I think he just kind of let it go. Really, Pasha? Okay, I put in that highlight a little too early, so I'm just gonna start again there. And I want to get the black rim around the iris if I can, because that. Now, I've been looking a lot at 19th century realist painters, John Singer Sargent, Sorolla, William Merritt Chase, and the like. And generally, the way they paint irises is they won't paint that dark, typically darker area of the iris. They'll just um, go a little bit lighter with the white of the eye against that iris, and and then pump up the color a little bit of the iris itself, or go a little bit darker, and then not really have um, that secondary color. And I right now I like to paint it in, but I'll have to reevaluate that and look at their paintings some more, and just and maybe figure out if I want to simplify it more like they have or had. I mean, they're gone, so I can do whatever I want. Okay, so if you look real carefully at the white of that eye there, it does get darker as it gets towards the corner and then drops off. And it's a very subtle value change, but it's important to get the white of the eye to look like it has that it's round, that it has shape. Okay, that's taking a little bit of time, this eye, and I know I'm going to work into it some more, but I do need to move on a little. And just need to change the shape of that corner, points a little bit lower, and has, what would you call that, kind of a taper to it, and then has a nice highlight right in the middle of that white there. Okay, so if I squint down, it's starting to look closer to my reference, and that's what I'm going for there. Okay. And then improve the shape of his nose. Has a bit of a bend in it right there, and a little bit darker on the top of the bulb of his nose here, and I go even a little bit darker there, just to help create the sense of that form. So sometimes it really does take working back and forth to match the value structure that you're seeing in the photo, or if you're working from a live model, and um, because what you're really looking for is to get those forms to turn in space just the same way, to create that illusion that the form is coming towards you or moving away, not just flat paint on a panel. When you do that successfully, you are creating like an optical illusion. If you do it well enough, it really is sort of kind of like a magic trick. It really forces your brain to do something. Your brain knows it's a painting, but your brain also is seeing it as shapes that are moving, and it's hard for a viewer to reckon those two things. I even think that sometimes photorealism fails at doing this as well, sometimes um, as a painting that's done in a painterly style, because you can get textures and shapes of brushstrokes that um, can move your eye much more forcefully in space than something that's really copying the photo exactly. And that's because um, the photo sometimes can be doing things that compete with um, the information that moves the form in space. Shadows that are falling at strange angles, or hair that's coming across the face, or just um, local color of someone's skin tones will be um, kind of opposite of the way the form is actually turning. And so, not painting what you see in the photo, but painting more what you know is going on, can have a much stronger effect um, than the than just copying the photo exactly. Okay, Pasha, did you lose the mouse underneath my desk? What what is going on here? Why? Why now? Okay. I thought this would be a great time to do this demo. Everyone in my family are out of the house, and thought it would just be, no distractions. And of course, I'm wrong. Could not. It's just like Murphy's Law here, just no matter what you do. Okay, I need the tip of his nose to come down just a bit longer than what I have it painted. So I'm just going to keep on playing with that edge there until I get it the way I want. And just then this edge just cuts a little bit faster. Okay. Okay, starting to get closer. Um, just push the tip down a little bit more here. It's just very small, subtle changes um, that I'm just playing around with, just getting just a little more accuracy. Have that little just at the tip of the nose where it turns down. There's it's a little bit more of a dip, and just getting that form to read a little bit better. Same with the tip of the nose. Okay. And I didn't make his nose as straight as it is, so I am going to push that edge over a little bit. Okay. All right. I could spend a lot of time just going back and forth there, so I'm going to show a little discipline and wait and get a little bit more of the the face. Just get adjustments done in other parts of the face. Sometimes when I'm painting, I lose my language skills. It's just because you you're working in the visual part of your cerebral cortex, or your whatever the digloma part of the brain. Can't even think. And so the right part of the brain is really kind of taking over, and the left part of the brain, where all your language is, you just have to work twice as hard to get that stuff to come out. Okay. So let's see. I do want the darker, again, the darker edge of his iris. I really went very green in his eye there, and I'm going to have to adjust that. Or just give him a green eyes instead of blue, but not sure I want to. Just, I can come in with very light phthalo blue there, just right on top, which I think will be good. And I'm actually, you can't see very much color in the photo of the edge of his iris, but I'm putting a little bit more blue in than what's actually there. And then this has a little bit harder edge right here. And give him a little bit more white underneath his eye. Okay, that is starting to look good. Want where his tear duct is, on the very edge where the white of the eye starts to go into the tear duct, is very red and dark, somewhat sharp there. And then the tear duct goes much lighter, very pink but light. Just indicating those. So I really want to feel that anatomy there in his eye. And there's interesting, even though it's very dark, you can see quite a bit of red in the shadow right there. And I'm really not, I'm going to have to repaint that because I'm not giving him enough white to the side of his pupil, or side of his iris. I mean, that everything else is in the right shape, but I'm not getting enough white here. So just going to push that out again. It didn't take me very long to paint it, so not a big deal to repaint it. And it looks like some of the paint that's there is doing some of the work for me already. Okay, that is actually there, much better. And gonna get his lower lid, and then I'm going to put in the little bit of reflected light. It's kind of like a light purple that's hitting the top of his lower lid. If I can get that just in the right place, then it will start to get the right effect. And let me get a highlight right there. Oh. So I'm using I have a little flat brush here, and I'm just getting it white right on the corner. In a way, that's acting like a detail brush, because I just can put a spot of white just where I want it. Okay. And okay, just sometimes you need to look where light turns to shadow. Sometimes that's where there's some stronger colors. where the temperature of the light is changing, and you get a hint of those stronger colors. And if you're not careful and you're doing a lot of blending, you won't get those colors if you're blending from the light to the dark. And sometimes you have to come back in and put down the pure color in to get that sense of color change, temperature change, not just the value change. So if you have warm lighting and it's changing to cool lighting, sometimes where you see the color is in that change from the warm to the cool, from the warm light to the cool shadow, or the cool light to the warm shadow. Um, this light here on him is a cool light, and so the shadows will tend to be a little bit more reddish, and that's where you're seeing like where there's a little bit more shadow in his cheek. It's going more red, not just from the color in his cheeks. And let's see if I can get around his eye. I just need a little bit more iris there. Yep. And repaint that outline of the iris just carefully. I'm not good enough to just do it all in one swoop like some painters, but that's okay. I don't need to. Um, it's won't affect the overall sense of brushwork in the painting. But what it needs is, I think the eyes need to be fairly accurate in this case, where other parts of the face don't have to be quite as perfectly rendered, because the eyes are really the focal point here. And even like the hair here doesn't need to be perfectly accurate, as long as you're you're getting the feeling of the hair being come forward here, sort of feeling like he has this wet hair that's come forward. And I could spend a lot of time doing every strand of hair, making sure it looks the same, but I'm not going to. Just need to get a feeling of it. Sometimes it's good to figure out where you can get away with just indicating something, not painting it, but just creating the sense of it, and where you need to be a little more accurate. Um, there is a danger of you just creating kind of a feeling all over and not really giving some accurate brushwork, where it just stops feeling like that you're painting a person. It just feels like a lack of the better word, like a cartoon of a person. And so it's or or it's just highly stylized, or um, and not losing that sense of realism. Okay, so I'm just looking back and forth to see where I can improve the the sense of form. And I need to go a little bit darker with my blacks. I remember I came in very transparently there, and so I need to come back in with additional passes of black to push that even darker. Okay. So Pasha, did your mouse get away? Meow? Yeah, it got away? Oh, okay. Well, nice try anyway. Okay, so I made his chin a little bit too light to begin with, so just coming in with some darker tones. And that orange, dark orangey color here, just pushing that even darker. I do a lot of times squinting when I'm painting. Sometimes some people think that I'm painting with my eyes closed, but what squinting does is you're actually looking like through your eyelashes. It kind of filters out a lot of the detail. So then you can start to see the overall larger shapes, relative shapes, and so that you can better see where you are. It has the same effect of standing up and moving away from your painting, and so that you see less detail and then you see greater the overall shapes. Okay, I need some clean orange and white here, right in this spot. Oh, actually, red and white. Then I can just come in. Sometimes you can just paint with pure white right into the paint that's already there. You're not actually going after a white, but what you want is just to lighten the mixture of the color that's down. That's if you're painting in alla prima. Okay. Ellen, are you doing a painting or a drawing today? So working on getting the top of um, his cheek there. Then this is really the cut of his cheek here, the underside. This form is where it's turning and then wrapping around a little bit. Just went a little bit too light there, so I'll adjust it, but it's the idea. And then this dark shape describes the lower lid, and then there's a little bit of reddish shadow that's beyond that. That's then cutting a little bit more than I have it here. Okay, I think we're making some progress. Again, adjusting those transitional colors, getting a little more color in there. Where I see some pinks, I want to make sure that I keep my mixtures fairly clean to get the intensity of the color. Okay. This comes out and then back, down, and out again. So if I'm looking on either side of his nose, where there's like a bump in his nose here, I want to make sure that the contours relate to each other. This is one thing that I constantly struggle with because I'm generally don't pay attention to it, and then later I see that I've kind of messed it up. And so, but it's that kind of thing, the relationship of the contours, that's a big part of how we helps us visually understand the form that's there. And I think it's one of the typical mistakes to make, because we can think of areas and we can think of lines, but we don't tend to think of um, relative contours as easily when we're drawing or painting. But it's the one place where you can improve the fastest in terms of the quality of your work if you pay much more attention to those contours. So when I say contours, for example, um, where's a good place to say? Okay, so it's a little hard to see in this cheek, but if I'm looking at the edge of this cheek where it curves in relationship to the curve on this side, or maybe up here where I see the outer part of that shape, if I if I look back and forth and see the relative where that turn is relationship to the other one, or maybe the tip of the nose, there's a little bit of a form here that matches the form on the other side, and I want to pay attention to that to make sure that I have this little form here in relationship to that form on the other side is relatively in the right place, because this is how your brain is able to tell, um, it understands the face as being symmetric. So when it's putting together what the forms are doing, and it understands something being symmetric, then it helps it understand the direction that it's pointing. Brains are really good at doing that stuff, and it's why painting is so hard in a way, because you have to get all those kind of things accurate, or our brain doesn't understand it correctly. Okay, gotta sneeze. Hold on. Okay, back. I think it was just one today, just one sneeze. Usually it's two or three. Okay, let me get some of the smaller forms in the ear. That should help us a little bit. I'm going right for the lights. Sometimes it really doesn't matter the order that you paint something in, um, and other times it does matter more. Sometimes you have to be as strategic. If you're painting things like eyes, you don't want to put the eyelashes in first, just because then you've got to end up painting around each eyelash, and it's much easier then to put the right color and values behind the eyelashes before you put them in, because then you can just um, put them in sort of one stroke and then leave it. Okay, trying to prove the shape of this ear. And I think I have the lobe where it's coming down to. I have that too low. So that's a good place to measure. Yep. So I'm going to come in, take about a half an inch off that there. And broke the shape of that ear a little bit there. Okay. It's looking a little better. Hopefully, as I paint, hopefully it will keep on looking better. Okay, so now I can correct these other shape. Put in some of my other darks. So that's not really gelling yet, but that's going to take a little bit of work to get the value structure. And that it's moving, it's in the right place in his head, too. Kind of important. Let's see. Okay. So, Ellen says a painting, but since I had no time to prepare, it is in Matisse Fava style. Um, and she said, "My cat has been crying since I started because it is time for our evening walk. It's been very stressful, and I just smeared paint on canvas without thinking. Bah, okay, it's fine. There's no contest or anything here. It's not a nothing has to come out perfect. It's just all practice." Let's see if I can get the right value change on the lips here to make it feel like it's has the right shape to it. Get the highlight here in the right spot. Okay, and then there's a center line of the lip, and I don't actually have it in the right place yet. That will help you understand better where it is. Turning, just an indication of seeing a little more of the upper lip from that one angle so that we understand that's where it's turning towards us for just that one part of the lip. Okay. And shadow better. Okay. Just keep on adjusting. So, how is that? Now I'm just going to blend a little bit, not too much, but add a little more color. But I just want to take areas that are just the transition is too strong and just softening it up in places so that it's easier to feel the form turning. And you can also feel where if you knock down some of the sharpness of those transitions so that other places that are sharp, there's a little more contrast. So it does. So you are able to move things in and out of space by using harder and sharper edges. If everything just feels like a big jumble, um, and everything is coming forward, then because the transitions are too strong, then you sort of lose that quality of the softness of a form, helping it move away. Let's see. And then as I do that, then I can see better where things need to sit back a little bit more. Like this far edge of the cheek needs to turn away faster. I just got a little more, too much black in there. So let's clean up that color. Okay, so that's starting to turn a little bit better. Okay, same with some of the edges here. It's a little bit of light highlight right on that upper lip. And as you push things back by making it softer, then those highlights really start to jump too, which is, I think, really helps create interest in the form. If you get the form to have highlights where they need to be and turn into shadow, so you get a full range of values across the form, then the painting will feel much stronger in terms of its sense of volume and space and light. Um, okay, let's get that eyelid shape still. The bottom eyelid still isn't quite have the right shape to it. And there's a lot of purple underneath the eye, kind of the shadow form on top of the cheek there. And so where I have this light here and then it drops off to shadow, you can see that I still have a pretty strong line there between the two. If you look in the photo, it's not that strong. And I can just start blending the two together, but there's also kind of like a stripe of orange there. So if I can get that sort of middle value that's an orangey red right along the edge of that form and make that transition softer, then I will have achieved what I wanted and not made the whole thing feel kind of all just one blob of the same color. I'm doing the same thing with the cast shadow off that lower eyelid. I'm instead of just blending it, I'm coming in with a pure color there. Same here, the edge of this eyebrow that's coming into the nose has a lot of red and orange in it. So instead of blending it, I am coming in with pure color there. And that's also going to help create additional interest and color in the painting. So sometimes it's blending and letting the paint be paint, and sometimes it's carefully coming in very intentionally with a color on top of the other colors that are there. Just pulling out, pushing and pulling out little forms that are in the face, the little extra light that's on the wing of that nostril. can get it in there, then it just gives us the viewer a little bit more information about what the form is doing. Soften that a little bit there. Have this blue form on the side of the cheek. I'm just softening it a little bit, but I also need to come down a little bit lower than it is. Because if I look at the space here where the bottom of that darker shape is to the top of the nostril, I had too much space in there. Just coming in and adjusting those little details so that they're more, just a little bit more accurate. Okay. So I'm still missing some subtleties here where this form is turning on the far side of the nose. So just making little marks. It's not big changes. It's just very subtle differences that that help the eye understand what the form is doing. And that's really kind of what I'm after. It took me a long time to understand how much little subtleties do um, in terms of telling our brain visually what is going on. It doesn't some I used to think it took these very big changes to get something to read properly, and it's not the case. It's little subtleties. Um, that highlight at the on the forehead is very um, has a lot of magenta in it right up here. So I'm mixing up some before it really gets to be very white. Then it goes darker here. Still has a lot of white in it though. Actually has a lot of gray, blue, something else in it, but it loses its intensity, chroma, and I need to make sure that I get that right. That's what's going to make it feel real, is where there's grays where they need to be. If you look at the work of 19th century realists, it's really amazing how much gray there is overall. A lot of the paintings tend to be fairly monochromatic with little touches of color. And it's because um, it's easier to describe form when you start to remove all the little color changes and just have predominantly value changes. It wasn't until the Impressionists that said, well, hey, you can also use color to describe form. And so there was a little bit of battle between the realists that had very little color in the form and the Impressionists that were pushing the color and narrowing the value range. So right in here in that cheek, there's very little change of color. So I can do a lot more blending until you get to there's a spot where there is a little bit more color coming in right here. Still giving him a little bit too much cheek there because I'm not turning that form fast enough. So I can just actually cut it even a little bit more than what's in the photo, just because it takes a little bit less work than just going back and forth. And just as long as it is reading right, then it's not a problem. If it looks like he's missing part of his cheek, then that is a problem. Okay, so I'm going to move that little bit of that darker feature that's along, it's the side of the bridge of his nose. Has to be, this is where contours matter. What I was saying is, so this shape here in relationship to that darker form that's on the other side. It's a little hard to see where the apex of that form is, but at least I want them to have a feeling that there's a relationship between those two sides. And I need to come in and move the highlight over just a little bit. And the same with up here. Okay, making some good progress here. So I'm about an hour and a half in, and so I think I'm going to take a full 2 hours to do this, which I think it will just be a stronger painting if I can resolve just some of these subtleties here. Okay, trying to fix parts of the ear that I had painted the wrong color and the wrong value. But luckily, oil paint is very forgiving. Okay, want to keep those shadows really red in the ear, not go too black. And still having a little problem with the accuracy here. Where the tip of that ear is. But I think once I get it in the right place, it is going to look so good. So good. It's funny when sometimes when you put pure white on the brush and then you go to paint it into an area that already has a lot of paint there, and ends up being nowhere near white. So you really have to then come in even thicker to get to the color that you want. Okay, and get a little more highlight there. And then I'm going to carve into the earlobe a little bit, right there. And then the upper tip of the ear actually is coming out just a little bit further. Okay, so many little shapes in there. I could spend a lot of time painting that if I wanted to, but I really just want to get the what's the word? Just an indication of it more. It's, if I can actually just have it start to really blur out, um, be more out of focus since it's moving away from us. Even have this contour of the back of his neck be very. You can have a lot of color there, but I need it. I can have it be very soft. Okay. So I feel like I'm missing an important element here. I think right, right here or so. Missing a little bit of his jewelry. And that's an important feature of this painting. It's interesting because it really does, it divides up the form of the neck with this black shape that comes in that then also just becomes part of the shadow. And that visually is very interesting, especially if I manage to paint it very simply, which I think I've almost done. I just want to clean up that edge a little bit. Then it's not quite black there, but the buckle itself has a little bit of orange red in it, and then has that one little touch of highlight there, and and then just another one up here. Okay, I think I'm getting that pretty close to where I want it without a lot of work. And a little more drastically there. Let's get the light this much lighter over here where that highlight is hitting his neck. This is a very clean, light, hard edged light that comes along the edge of his shirt. Got the forms in his neck to read a little bit better. Okay. And his shirt is coming up a little bit sooner than I have it. Okay. So, thinking I'm going to put about 15 more minutes into this, see if I can resolve some of the places, but I've got everything there. Everything's down. It's just not, there's just areas that aren't reading or are too strong and they need to be knocked back. And if I just get all those little things resolved, then it will be where I want it to be. So we have a little bit where the lip changes direction here, where it comes down from the nose. Need to make some indication of that. And the upper edge of the upper lip where it gets close to the mouth will be turning up towards the light a little bit more. So I just want some, well, that was a lot of indication of light, but I just want a little. So I'm just going to blend that in a little bit more and try to get some of the forms above his mouth to read correctly. Just this little dip where the philtrum is. Yeah, sort of that Elvis Presley kind of shape to his mouth there. Not a complete sneer thing going, but kind of that shape to it. And I am going to trim back the other way, the tip of his nose, just a little bit. I think I just went a little bit too far. Not by much, though. And that drops very quickly off into shadow here. Okay, then a little bit of light here on his cheek. With a touch of reflection, like there's a little bit of sweat or something on his cheek there. And the same, some droplets on his face that I can indicate. So the droplets will have a little bit of light and a little bit of dark in them. Right now, the way this photo is, we see mostly the light. And you see it most here on his brow. I've just been painting white, but I really need to come in with a little bit of dark there, just to paint into it, to give that sense of texture and pores of the skin. Okay, a little bit some darker areas here. Okay, this is the part of the demo where my voice starts to drop off, and I just have to keep on reminding myself to talk louder. Sometimes I've reviewed these videos afterwards, and I'm just like, where did I go? I'm just like whispering. Okay, so if I can come in with, I need to do a very sharp little shadow here underneath the nose. I got all the other values right, but it just needs a little, the accent there to get it to read correctly, to really feel like you're feeling the underside and the inside of the nostril there. And that is just really going to help separate it from the rest of the face. Including this little shape here that's very red. Yeah. And then complementing that with the light of the edge of the philtrum there. And then typically there'll be, don't really see it here, but sometimes there's a little dark shape that's there. And then there is a dark shape that's just below the nose on the edge of that philtrum there. That is really helping define the shape there. And this here, this starts to go into gray, bluish gray, that's just underneath the nose. I don't have that. I'm not matching the photo exactly, but it's pretty close. So I'm not going to make myself crazy here, just trying to get enough information there that you feel it. And it's a little bit, the wing of the tip of his nose comes out just a little bit further, for this has this little bit of darker shape here. And then this does come down right here. Okay. Just making these subtle adjustments that are really just giving a little bit more anatomy. I am just going to take a very thick amount of paint and just put it right here on his upper brow. Just come in really thick and then pretty thickly with some pinks also on that upper brow right up here. Just really want that impasto to replicate, or instead of coming in there with a lot of detail, just create a lot of texture in the paint itself. Kind of like the old masters there. And then I can do the same along the edge of the whiter paint. And this area is a little bit lighter if I have it painted. Remember that this area has to be lighter, and then it has to then drop off into shadow. It's just a very slow transition because it has to have a gradation that changes all the way across the forehead there. So I have to pay attention, even though there's these little lighter and darker shapes in there, I have to pay attention to what that form is doing across the whole length of the forehead. Right now, I don't quite have it turning. I have too many jumbled little shapes in there. And it does go grayer. There is some bits of red, but it does go grayer as it falls off into shadow. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. Still dropping off just a little bit too quickly still. And I don't have quite enough light here in this part. And come in with more white. Still have to unify some of the shapes. Still, I think I have to blend a little bit here to get that transition to sit back enough. just taking the time just to look back and forth. So there's some pretty interesting orange reds here in the tip of the ear. I just want to make sure I get those because they're beautiful. Just, it's going to give it enough additional interest. Okay, and remember I said there are some purpley kind of bluish tones in that shadow there. So not really getting those yet. So I'm just going to be a little more forceful about it. Get those in. And then I'm missing the top of his shoulder here, which is pretty reddish as it goes into black. Okay, went a little too far. That's okay. Okay, so I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to finish this up. For all two of you that are still watching, that's fine. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. It is a little different painting by yourself and then or turning your camera on and letting the rest of the world join in. Okay, coming in with pretty thickly with white here. Again, create a little more interest with the thicker paint. I'm not too clumsy about it. I need to move the line of his neck over a little. It's looking a little detached, and that's kind of thing where I was talking about contours, like the line of this neck has to continue down to feel like it's it's just not a random shape there. It's actually the side of his neck. It has to be in the right place to read correctly. Okay, really want that to go dark, dark here. And then have a fairly soft edge on the top of his shoulder there. Okay. And, oops, didn't realize how much white I had on that brush. So here, I want to describe his chin correctly. So it does turn in 3 or 4 different directions before it comes all the way around. And so just 3 more minutes here. just sitting back and evaluating. Sometimes I have to stop painting to do that. And fixing this shape of his eye a little bit there. So, and I made that highlight in his eye just a little bit too big. Go and cut that back a little bit. And if I look, I don't have, I either have one eye too high or the other too low. And I think that the time that I have, I'm just going to creep that eye up a little bit. Get it just so that it sits. Remember before I did drop it down? Well, I think what was important is it's too low in relationship to the other eye. It may be in the right place, but it's just not reading right. Okay, that's starting to look a little better. Yeah, I have to repaint his pupil and the far part of his iris. Okay, and lid. So now I can come in with a new highlight. That's too high. Let's try it again. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, and 1 minute. Okay, so thank you. Um, I think all two of you now, or three, for sticking with me. And please tune in on Tuesday night where I am going to paint. I've already picked out the photo. I'm trying to remember her name now off the top of my head. Um, but it was selection D and in the voting. And I will see you all on Tuesday if you choose to tune in. And thank you for watching this demo. Bye.